Get out of my classroom. Did the janitor forget to lock the service door again? Professor Arthur Sterling's voice cracked like a whip across the silence of the grand lecture hall. It was a sound that commanded fear, the voice of a man who believed himself to be a god among insects. He stood at the front of the room, a towering figure in a $3,000 tweed suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his gold watch gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Behind him was the beast. That's what the students called it. A 20-foot blackboard covered in a chaotic storm of white chalk. Symbols, variables, quantum mechanics equations that twisted and turned like a labyrinth with no exit. The Stirling paradox. An equation that had remained unsolved for 20 years. An equation that Stirling himself had built his entire career on, daring anyone to crack it. And standing in front of him, looking smaller than a grain of sand against a mountain, was Leo. Leo was 10 years old. He was black. He wore a gray hoodie that was 2 sizes too big, the sleeves hanging over his hands like paws. His jeans were faded at the knees, and his sneakers had a hole in the left toe. On his nose sat a pair of thick-rimmed glasses that he had taped together at the bridge. He clutched a battered leather notebook to his chest as if it were a shield. I was just looking," Leo whispered. His voice was so quiet it barely traveled past the first row. "Looking." Sterling let out a short, cruel laugh. He turned to the auditorium, filled with 300 of the country's brightest students, sons of senators, daughters of CEOs, future leaders of the world. "Did you hear that? The stray wants to look at quantum physics." Laughter rippled through the room. It started low, nervous, but grew as the students saw Sterling smiling. If the professor was laughing, it was safe to laugh. It was smart to laugh. Leo shrank back. He felt the heat rising in his cheeks. He knew this feeling. He felt it every time he walked past the expensive coffee shops on campus, every time security guards followed him in the library. The feeling of being dirt in a room full of diamonds. "This is not a homeless shelter, boy," Sterling sneered, stepping off the podium. He walked toward Leo, his polished leather shoes clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. Click, 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 like a predator closing in. "This is the elite physics department of Kingsley University. The tuition for one semester here costs more than your entire family makes in a lifetime. If you even have a family." That one hurt. That one pierced through Leo's chest like a cold knife. Leo didn't have a family. Not anymore. He remembered the smell of his father's old study. It wasn't a study like this, with mahogany desks and leather chairs. It was a kitchen table in a small apartment in the Bronx. But his father, Marcus, had made it feel like the center of the universe. Marcus had been a janitor by day, but at night, he was a king of numbers. He would sit Leo on his lap and open old textbooks he'd found in the trash. "Numbers don't lie, Leo," his father used to say, his large, rough hand guiding Leo's small one as they wrote out equations on napkins. "People lie. People judge. People see your skin or your clothes, and they think they know you. But numbers? 2 plus 2 is always 4. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. The math is always the truth. Stick to the truth, son." But Marcus was gone. A car accident 3 years ago. And Leo's mother had passed when he was a baby. Now, Leo lived in a foster home on the edge of the city. A place where books were torn and dreams were discouraged. A place where he had to hide his notebook under his mattress so the older boys wouldn't steal it. "I'm waiting," Sterling barked, snapping Leo back to the present. The professor loomed over him now, smelling of expensive cologne and old coffee. "Are you deaf as well as lost? I said get out." Leo took a step back, his grip tightening on his notebook. "I didn't mean to interrupt, sir. I saw the board from the hallway. The equation. The third variable in the second line. It's unstable." The room went dead silent. Sterling froze. His eyes narrowed. For a second, just a split second, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. But then it was replaced by a rage so cold it lowered the temperature in the room. Unstable, Sterling repeated softly, dangerously. A child that looks like he crawled out of a dumpster. You are telling me, a Nobel Prize nominee, that my life's work is unstable. It creates a loop, Leo said, his voice gaining a tiny bit of strength. He pointed a shaking finger at the massive board. If you factor in the Planck constant there, the energy output becomes infinite. It collapses the whole theorem. You missed a negative sign. Enough, Sterling roared. He snatched the notebook from Leo's hands. No, Leo cried out, reaching for it. Please, that's mine. It was the only thing he had left of his father. The pages were filled with their work, their memories. Sterling held the notebook high, out of Leo's reach. He looked at it with disgust, as if he were holding a dead rat. What is this trash? Scribbles? Cartoons? He flipped it open. He didn't even look at the equations scrawled inside. Complex algorithms that would have baffled a graduate student. He just saw dirty paper and messy handwriting. This is garbage, Sterling announced to the class. Just like you. He tossed the notebook. It flew through the air, pages flapping, and landed with a wet thud in a trash can near the door. Leo felt tears hot and stinging in his eyes. He wanted to run. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to sink into the floor and never come back. Pick it up, Sterling said. Leo looked at him. What? I said, pick it up. Sterling pointed to the trash can. And then take yourself out with the rest of the rubbish. Go on. Show everyone where you belong. A few students in the front row pulled out their phones. The red lights of recording video cameras blinked like tiny, judgmental eyes. Leo could see them whispering, giggling. Look at him, a blonde girl in a cashmere sweater whispered loudly. He's crying. Did his mommy forget to pick him up from daycare? Probably looking for something to steal. A boy in a varsity jacket laughed. Leo walked slowly toward the trash can. His legs felt like lead. Every step was a struggle. He reached into the bin, pushing past empty coffee cups and crumpled papers until his fingers brushed the familiar leather cover of his notebook. He pulled it out, wiping a coffee stain off the cover with his sleeve. He hugged it tight. Good boy. Sterling smirked, checking his watch. Now leave. We have real work to do. Work that requires a brain, not a sob story. Leo turned to the door. He put his hand on the handle. He should go. He should just leave and never come back. That's what the world expected him to do. Fade away. Be invisible. But then he heard his father's voice again. The math is always the truth. Stick to the truth, son. Leo stopped. He took his hand off the door handle. He turned around. The room was still laughing, a low hum of mockery. Sterling had turned his back to Leo and was erasing a section of the board, pontificating to the class. You see, class, Sterling was saying, in physics there are constants and there are variables. Some things matter. Some things do not. That boy, he is a variable that equals zero. He contributes nothing to the equation. You're still wrong, Leo said. His voice wasn't a whisper this time. It was clear, steady. Sterling stopped erasing. The chalk screeched against the board. He turned around slowly, his face turning a shade of red that clashed with his suit. Excuse me, you're still wrong. Leo walked back into the center of the room. He didn't look at the students. He didn't look at the phones. He looked straight at the board. You can erase it. You can yell. You can throw my book in the trash. But the math is still wrong. And I can prove it. The audacity hung in the air like smoke. You challenge me? Sterling walked down the steps of the podium until he was standing chest to face with the boy. He loomed over him, using his height to intimidate. I have published 12 books. I hold 3 doctorates. I advise the Pentagon. And you're a little boy in dirty clothes. You think you can solve the Sterling paradox? A problem that the greatest minds of this generation have failed to crack. It's not a paradox, Leo said, looking up through his taped glasses. It's just a mistake. You forgot to carry the one. The class gasped. Someone in the back row let out a shocked. Sterling's veins bulged in his neck. He was shaking with rage. This insolence. This absolute disrespect. He wanted to grab the boy by the collar and throw him out himself. But the cameras were rolling. He had to maintain his dignity. He had to crush this insect intellectually. He had to humiliate him so badly that he would never dare to step foot in a university again. Sterling reached into his pocket and pulled out a fresh piece of chalk. He tossed it at Leo. It hit Leo in the chest and fell to the floor. It broke in two. Fine, Sterling hissed, his voice dripping with venom. You want to play professor? Go ahead. Solve it. You have 10 minutes. If you solve it, I will apologize. I will give you my tenure. I will name the building after you. He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. But when you fail, Sterling leaned in close, his breath hot on Leo's face. When you fail to write even a single coherent number, I will have you arrested for trespassing. I will call the police, and I will make sure they drag you out of here in handcuffs. I will make sure you spend the night in a cell where you belong. Do we have a deal? Leo looked at the broken chalk on the floor. He looked at the board towering above him. He looked at Sterling, the man who represented every door that had ever been slammed in his face. Leo bent down. His small fingers grasped the piece of white chalk. It felt dusty and dry. He stood up. Deal, Leo said. He walked to the board. It was so high he had to stand on his tiptoes to reach the bottom line of the equation. The room was silent now. Not the silence of respect, but the silence of anticipation. They were waiting for the train wreck. They were waiting to see the little boy cry again. They were waiting for the show. Sterling crossed his arms, leaning back against his desk, checking his Rolex. Clock starts now. Don't waste my chalk. Leo took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a second. He visualized the numbers. In his mind, they weren't static scratches on a slate. They were alive. They were moving streams of light, dancing and weaving. He saw the structure of the equation, the beautiful architecture of it, and he saw the ugly crack in the foundation where Sterling had made his error. He opened his eyes. He began to write. Scritch, scratch, scritch. The sound of the chalk was loud in the quiet hall. Leo didn't write slowly. He wrote with a furious speed, his hand moving like a conductor's baton. He crossed out Sterling's third line. He rewrote the variable. He added a new function that nobody in that room had ever seen before. Sterling's smirk started to fade. He squinted. He pushed his glasses up his nose. He took a step closer. Leo wasn't drawing cartoons. He wasn't writing gibberish. He was deriving a new proof using non-Euclidean geometry to bypass the energy loop. It was advanced. It was impossibly advanced. It was the kind of math that only a handful of people on the planet understood. 1 minute passed. Leo was moving to the second panel of the blackboard. He had to jump slightly to reach the higher parts. 3 minutes passed. The students stopped recording and started staring. Mouths hung open. The girl in the cashmere sweater lowered her phone. The boy in the varsity jacket sat up straight. 5 minutes passed. Leo was covered in chalk dust. His gray hoodie was streaked with white. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He was in the zone. He was flying. Sterling felt a cold sweat break out on his back. He recognized what the boy was doing. He was dismantling Sterling's life work, piece by piece, and rebuilding it into something better. Something elegant. Something correct. Stop, Sterling whispered. But no one heard him. Stop it, Sterling said louder, his voice trembling. Leo didn't stop. He was on the final line. The conclusion. The proof that bridged the gap between quantum mechanics and general relativity. The holy grail of physics. I said stop. Sterling lunged forward. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let a child, a nobody, destroy his legacy in 10 minutes. He grabbed Leo's shoulder and yanked him back. Leo stumbled, dropping the chalk. "You little vandal," Sterling shouted, his face pale with panic. "You're ruining the board. You're just writing nonsense. Get away from there." He grabbed an eraser. He was going to erase it. He had to erase it before anyone else realized what it was. "Don't touch that board, Arthur." The voice came from the back of the hall. It was calm, authoritative, and amplified by a microphone. Everyone turned. Standing at the double doors at the top of the auditorium was a woman. She was flanked by 2 security guards, but she didn't need them to look powerful. She wore a sharp navy suit, and her presence filled the room instantly. It was Dr. Evelyn Gray, the dean of the university, and standing next to her was a man in a military uniform with stars on his shoulders. General Holloway from the Department of Defense. "Dean Gray," Sterling stammered, holding the eraser in midair. I was just removing this graffiti. This child broke in. He's mentally unstable. I was protecting the university's property." Dr. Gray walked down the stairs. The students parted for her like the Red Sea. She didn't look at Sterling. Her eyes were fixed on the blackboard. She walked right past the professor. She stood in front of Leo's work. She adjusted her glasses. She traced the line of the equation with her eyes, following Leo's logic from the bottom left to the top right. She stood there for a long time. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Finally, she turned to the general. "It's true," she said softly. "He solved it. He actually solved it." She turned to look at Leo. Leo was breathing hard, wiping chalk from his hands onto his jeans. He looked terrified. He thought he was in trouble. Dr. Gray knelt down on one knee. She didn't care about her expensive suit touching the dusty floor. She looked Leo in the eyes. "What is your name, young man?" she asked. "Leo," he whispered. "Leo Mathis. Leo Mathis," she repeated, as if memorizing the name of a king. "Do you know what you just did?" "I fixed the math," Leo said. He forgot to carry the one. A chuckle ran through the room, but this time it wasn't mocking. It was awe. Dr. Gray stood up and turned to Sterling. Her face changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by cold steel. "Professor Sterling," she said, her voice echoing, "you just assaulted a guest of this university. You attempted to destroy a breakthrough that the government has been spending billions trying to find. And you humiliated a child who possesses more intellect in his little finger than you have in your entire body. He's a fraud," Sterling shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Leo. "He memorized it. Someone put him up to it. Look at him. He's nothing. He's a street rat." Dr. Gray pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "Actually, Arthur," she said coldly, "he's your boss." "Boss?" Sterling repeated the word as if it were a piece of rotten meat in his mouth. He looked from Dr. Gray to the small, trembling boy covered in chalk dust. A vein throbbed violently in the professor's temple. "Have you lost your mind, Evelyn? The stress of the administration has finally cracked you. This urchin is nobody. He is a distraction. He is a termite eating away at the foundation of this institution." "You are half right, Arthur," Dr. Gray said, her voice dangerously calm. She stepped closer, her heels sinking into the expensive carpet of the lecture hall. "He is the foundation of this institution. Literally." She turned to the audience, to the 300 stunned students and the live stream cameras that had silently started broadcasting to the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Gray announced, "you all know this building as the Sterling Hall of Physics. You believe the funding comes from government grants and Professor Sterling's patents. But that is a lie." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sterling took a step back, his face losing some of its color. "The land this university stands on, the endowment that pays your salaries, and the patent for the quantum chip that powers this very laboratory. It all belongs to the Mathis Family Trust." Sterling laughed. It was a high, desperate sound. Mathis? You mean Marcus Mathis? The janitor who used to scrub the toilets on the third floor? Don't tell me you're suggesting this boy is the son of the help. Marcus Mathis was not just the help. Leo spoke up. His voice was still small, but it cut through Sterling's laughter like a razor blade. Leo stepped forward, clutching his battered notebook. He looked at the general standing beside the dean. He looked at the students. And then he looked at the man who had tormented his father for years. "My father," Leo said, his voice trembling with suppressed emotion, "was the one who wrote the first half of that equation. The half you stole." The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the auditorium. 3 years ago, it was 2 a.m. The university was a tomb of silence, smelling of floor wax and old paper. Marcus Mathis pushed his mop bucket down the hallway. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with hands roughened by bleach and hard labor. But his eyes were bright, burning with an intelligence that terrified the faculty. Marcus wasn't supposed to be in the faculty lounge. But every night, after emptying the trash cans, he would stand in front of the small whiteboard in the corner. He would pick up a marker, and the world of mops and buckets would vanish. Little Leo, 7 years old then, sat under the table, coloring in his notebook. He watched his father work. "Look, Leo," Marcus would whisper, drawing a complex curve. "They think energy moves like a river, but it doesn't. It moves like a pulse, like a heartbeat. If you can catch the rhythm, you can power a city with a single battery." Leo didn't understand the physics then, but he understood the rhythm. He saw the beauty. One night, Professor Sterling had walked in. He had forgotten his briefcase. He saw the black janitor standing at the board. He saw the equations that were years ahead of anything the department had produced. "What are you doing?" Sterling had demanded, disgusted, erasing that graffiti immediately. Marcus had lowered his head. "Sorry, sir. Just thinking." "Janitors aren't paid to think," Sterling had sneered. "You're paid to clean. If I catch you defacing university property again, I'll have you fired and blacklisted. Now get out." Marcus grabbed Leo's hand, and they hurried out. But Leo looked back. He saw Sterling staring at the board. He saw Sterling pull out his phone and take a picture of Marcus's work. 2 days later, Sterling published a breakthrough paper. He received a $1 million grant. He bought a new Porsche. And Marcus? Marcus stayed quiet. He didn't have the money for lawyers. He didn't have the status. He just kept working, kept writing in his leather notebooks, telling Leo, "The truth has a way of coming out, son. Just wait. The math never lies." And then the accident happened. A drunk driver. A rainy night. And Leo was left alone with nothing but a box of notebooks and a legacy he couldn't prove. Back to present day. Sterling's face was a mask of fury. "Lies. Slander. You assert that I, Arthur Sterling, stole from a toilet scrubber? I will sue you for defamation. I will sue this university into the ground." "You can't sue the owner, Arthur," Dr. Gray said coldly. She opened a folder she was holding. "When Marcus Mathis died, we found his storage unit. It wasn't full of cleaning supplies. It was full of prototypes, patents, documents filed and notarized years before you discover them." She held up a document. It was yellowed with age, coffee-stained, but the stamp of the U.S. Patent Office was clear. "The Sterling paradox?" Dr. Gray continued. "It's actually the Mathis theorem. Marcus patented the core algorithm 5 years ago. He structured his will so that if anything happened to him, his intellectual property, and the billions of dollars in royalties it generated from the tech companies using it, would go into a trust for his son." She pointed at Leo. "Leo isn't just a student, Arthur. Leo owns the controlling interest in the company that manufactures the lab equipment you use every day. He owns the license to the software you write your papers on. Technically speaking, he signs your paycheck." Sterling staggered back. He grabbed the edge of the podium to steady himself. This couldn't be happening. It was a nightmare. A bad dream. No, Sterling whispered. No, this is a trick. A diversity stunt. He turned to the students, desperate for an ally. Don't you see? They're trying to replace real merit with charity. Look at him. He can't even afford new shoes. You think he's a billionaire genius. I don't buy new shoes, Leo said, his voice gaining volume. He stepped away from the dean, standing on his own. Because I don't care about shoes. I care about the work. Leo walked over to the trash can where Sterling had thrown his notebook earlier. He kicked the can over. Garbage spilled out onto the pristine floor. You threw away my father's work because it looked dirty to you, Leo said. You judged the book by its cover. You judged me by my hoodie. You missed the variable because you were too busy looking at the mirror. Leo pointed at the massive blackboard behind Sterling. And that's why you couldn't solve it. You tried to force the numbers to fit your ego. But the equation required humility. It required you to admit that energy can be lost before it can be gained. My father knew about loss. You only know about taking. The general stepped forward. His metals clinked softly. Professor Sterling, the general barked. I am General Holloway, DARPA. We have been monitoring the Mathis Trust for years. We knew Marcus. We tried to recruit him, but he refused to leave his son. We respected his privacy. The general glared at Sterling with contempt. We also know that for the past 6 months, you have been falsifying data to cover up the fact that you couldn't finish the equation. You've been taking government money for a project you didn't understand. That's not just academic fraud, Professor. That is federal embezzlement. Sterling's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. The doors were blocked by security. The dean looked ready to execute him. The general looked ready to court-martial him. And the boy looked like a giant. Sterling lunged. It was a desperate, foolish move. He didn't go for the door. He went for the blackboard. He grabbed a heavy metal ruler from the desk and swung it at the board, trying to smash the chalk, trying to destroy the proof Leo had written. If I can't have it, no one can. Sterling screamed, saliva flying from his mouth. Security, Dr. Gray shouted. But before the guards could reach him, Leo didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just watched. Sterling slipped. His expensive leather shoes lost traction on the chalk dust Leo had created. He flailed, his arms windmills of tweed and panic, and crashed hard onto the floor. Thud! He landed right at Leo's feet. The room went silent again. Sterling groaned, trying to push himself up. He looked up. All he could see were the worn-out, hole-ridden sneakers of the boy he had called rubbish. Leo looked down at the fallen man. He didn't kick him. He didn't spit on him. He just opened his notebook to a fresh page. The negative sign, Leo said softly. You missed it again. Sterling collapsed back onto the floor, defeated not by force, but by gravity and truth. The students didn't laugh this time. One by one, they stood up. It started with the boy in the varsity jacket, the one who had mocked Leo earlier. He stood up and started clapping. Then the girl in the cashmere sweater. Then the entire front row. Within seconds, the whole auditorium was on its feet, a thunderous ovation washing over the small boy in the gray hoodie. They weren't clapping for his money. They weren't clapping for his title. They were clapping for his mind. Dr. Gray walked over and put a hand on Leo's shoulder. She looked down at Sterling, who was now being hauled to his feet by 2 burly security guards. Get him out of here, Dr. Gray ordered, and call the police. I believe the owner of this university wants to press charges. She looked at Leo. Do you, Mr. Mathis? Leo looked at Sterling, who was now weeping, begging, his dignity shredded. I don't want him arrested for being mean to me, Leo said, his voice echoing in the hall. I want him arrested for stealing my father's life. Done, said the general. As the guards dragged Sterling away, kicking and screaming about his tenure and his reputation, Leo felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't happiness. It was lighter than that. It was the weight of a secret he had carried for 3 years finally dropping off his shoulders. He looked at the blackboard one last time. The equation was perfect. It shimmered in the light. "Leo," Dr. Gray said gently, kneeling beside him again. "There is someone else you need to meet. Someone who has been waiting a long time to talk to the son of Marcus Mathis." Leo turned. Standing in the doorway, behind a crowd of cheering students, was a woman. She looked familiar. She wore a simple dress, and her face was lined with age and sorrow. But her eyes were the same shape as Leo's. "Grandma," Leo whispered. He had been told she was dead. The foster system had told him he had no living relatives. Sterling lied about that too, Dr. Gray said, her voice tight with anger. "He used his influence to block your family from finding you. He wanted you isolated. He wanted you weak. He didn't want anyone to know who you really were." The woman ran down the stairs. She didn't care about the dean or the general. She scooped Leo up in her arms, burying her face in his chalk-dusty neck. "Oh, my baby," she sobbed. "My smart, beautiful baby. I've been looking for you. I've been looking everywhere." Leo closed his eyes and hugged her back. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't just a brain. He wasn't just a variable. He was a boy. But the story wasn't over. Sterling was gone, but the rot in the university went deeper than one man. Leo pulled away from his grandmother and looked at Dr. Gray. "The board," Leo said. Sterling said the board supported him. He said they hated people like me. Dr. Gray's expression darkened. "He wasn't lying about that, Leo. Sterling was just the face. The board of directors, they knew. They knew about your father's patents. They helped Sterling hide them so they wouldn't have to pay royalties. They valued profit over truth." Leo adjusted his glasses. He gripped his notebook. "Then we have a meeting," Leo said. "A meeting?" Dr. Gray asked, surprised. "Yes," Leo said, walking towards the exit, his grandmother holding his hand. "I want to call a board meeting. Right now. And I want them to see who they stole from." He stopped at the door and looked back at the students. "Class dismissed," he said. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. The doors slid open, revealing a world far removed from the dusty lecture hall below. This was the sanctuary of power. Plush carpets that swallowed footsteps, walls of glass overlooking the city skyline, and the smell of money, crisp, cold, and sterile. Leo walked in the middle, holding his grandmother's hand on one side and Dr. Gray's on the other. He still wore his chalk-stained hoodie. His sneakers still had holes. But as he walked past the terrified secretaries, he didn't look like a charity case anymore. He looked like a storm gathering on the horizon. "They're waiting," Dr. Gray whispered, stopping before a set of double mahogany doors. "The board. They think they can buy you off, Leo. They think you're a child who will trade a billion-dollar legacy for a new bicycle." Leo adjusted his glasses. He tightened his grip on his father's notebook. "I don't need a bicycle," Leo said. "I know how to walk." Dr. Gray pushed the doors open. The boardroom was massive. A table the length of a bowling lane dominated the center, surrounded by 12 leather chairs. 11 men and 1 woman sat there. They were the architects of the university's corruption, the people who had turned a blind eye to Sterling's theft because it made them rich. At the head of the table sat Chairman Vance. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of expensive soap, smooth, pale, and slippery. Vance smiled, standing up. He didn't look worried. He looked like a man greeting a pet. "Dr. Gray, and this must be the little prodigy. Leo, is it?" Vance gestured to a small, folding metal chair set up in the corner, away from the main table. "Sit there, son. We have some grown-up business to discuss with Dr. Gray, and then we'll see about getting you some ice cream." The disrespect was so casual, so practiced, it took Leo's breath away. They hadn't even set a place for him at the table. Leo didn't move toward the folding chair. He let go of his grandmother's hand. He walked straight to the head of the table where Vance was standing. Leo stood barely as tall as the seated board members. But when he spoke, his voice filled the room. "That's my chair," Leo said, pointing at Vance's leather seat. Vance blinked. A few board members chuckled nervously. "Excuse me?" Vance's smile tightened. "Leo, this is a board of directors meeting. This chair is for the chairman." "The chairman works for the shareholders," Leo recited, quoting a corporate law textbook he had memorized in the foster home library. "I own 51% of the voting stock through the Mathis Trust. That makes me the majority shareholder. That makes you my employee." The room went dead silent. The chuckles died in throats. "Now," Leo said, his voice hard. "Move." Vance looked at Dr. Gray. She nodded slowly, her face grim. He looked at General Holloway, who was standing by the door with his arms crossed, a silent sentinel of federal power. Vance swallowed. His arrogance evaporated. Slowly, humiliatingly, he gathered his papers and moved to the side. Leo climbed into the massive leather chair. It swallowed him. His feet didn't touch the floor, but he laid his battered notebook on the polished mahogany table with a thud that sounded like a gavel. "My father," Leo began, looking at each board member in turn. "Marcus Mathis. He worked here for 10 years. He cleaned your floors. He emptied your trash. Do any of you remember his face?" Silence. "I didn't think so," Leo said. "But you remembered his patents. You remembered the millions of dollars his Sterling paradox brought into this university." Leo opened the notebook. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not a math equation this time, but a spreadsheet. "I've been looking at the numbers," Leo said. "Not the physics, the accounting. Since my father died, the royalties from his chip design were supposed to go to a trust for me. Instead, they went into a shell company called Apex Solutions." He looked at the woman on the board. "You own Apex, Mrs. Calloway." "Correct." Mrs. Calloway turned pale. She reached for her water glass, her hand shaking so badly she spilled it. "And you?" Leo looked at a heavy-set man. "Mr. Thorne, you approved the construction of a new lab that was never built. $5 million. Where did it go? Did it just evaporate? Like heat? Now see here." Thorne stood up, his face purple. "I will not be interrogated by a child playing dress-up. This is preposterous. Where are his guardians? This is a legal nightmare." "I am his guardian." His grandmother stepped forward, her voice shaking with rage. "And I am witnessing a crime scene. And here is the legal nightmare." General Holloway stepped forward, placing a heavy file on the table. "This is a federal audit. We track the money. Every cent. You didn't just steal from child. You stole from a Department of Defense contract. That's treason." The word hung in the air. Treason. Vance tried to salvage the situation. He put on his best negotiating face. "Now, Leo, listen. Mistakes were made. Sterling was a bad apple. We all agree. But we can fix this. We can set up a scholarship in your name. We could buy you a house. A big one. With a pool. You'd like that, wouldn't you? A pool." Leo looked at Vance. He saw the fear behind the man's eyes. He realized these people weren't giants. They were just small, greedy people in big chairs. "My father taught me about variables," Leo said quietly. "If a variable makes the equation unstable, you remove it." He looked at Dr. Gray. "Fire them," Leo said. "What?" Vance gasped. "You can't. We are the board. We run this city." "Fire them all," Leo repeated, his voice rising, echoing his father's strength. "Every single one who knew. Every single one who signed a check. Every single one who looked at my father and saw a janitor instead of a genius." "You can't do this," Thorne shouted. "We have contracts. We have golden parachutes. We'll sue you for every penny." Actually, Dr. Gray interjected, a small smile playing on her lips. Section 4, Paragraph C of your employment contracts. In the event of proven criminal negligence or fraud, all severance packages are null and void. You don't get a golden parachute, gentlemen. You get a cardboard box. Dr. Gray pulled out her phone. Security to the boardroom. Escort the former board of directors off the premises. Pandemonium erupted. Men in expensive suits started shouting, pleading, threatening. Mrs. Calloway was sobbing. Vance tried to run out the back door, but walked straight into the chest of a waiting FBI agent. Leo sat still in the big chair. He watched them being led away, one by one. The room cleared. The shouting faded down the hallway. Finally, it was just Leo, his grandmother, Dr. Gray, and the general. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was clean. Leo closed his notebook. He slid out of the chair. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below him, the campus was buzzing. News vans were surrounding the building. Students were holding signs that said, "Justice for Leo." "What now, Leo?" Dr. Gray asked gently. "You own a university. You own a tech empire. What do you want to do?" Leo looked at his reflection in the glass. He saw the boy in the hoodie. He saw his father's eyes. He turned back to them. "I want to open the doors," Leo said. "Which doors?" the general asked. "All of them," Leo said. "The service doors, the back doors, the doors that keep locked to keep people like me out. I want to find every kid who is smart but poor. Every kid who is writing equations on a napkin because they can't afford a notebook. And I want to bring them here." He looked at the empty boardroom table. "And next time," Leo smiled, a genuine 10-year-old smile, "we're going to need a bigger table." 1 year later, the iron bars of the Federal Correctional Institution were cold. Cold and gray, stripping away all color from the world. In cell block C, inmate number 8940 sat on a thin cot. He didn't wear a $3,000 tweed suit anymore. He wore a faded orange jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent. Arthur Sterling stared at the small television mounted in the common room. He couldn't look away. On the screen, a red ribbon was being cut. A massive crowd was cheering. Confetti rained down like snow. And there, standing in the center of it all, was a boy in a fresh, clean hoodie and new sneakers. The camera zoomed in on the building behind the boy. The bronze letters that used to spell Sterling Hall had been ripped down. In their place, shining in the morning sun, were new letters. The Marcus Mathis Institute of Quantum Physics. Sterling closed his eyes. A single tear leaked out, lost in the wrinkles of a face that had aged 10 years in 12 months. He had tried to erase a janitor from history. Instead, the janitor had erased him. The campus didn't look like a fortress anymore. The heavy iron gates that used to keep the locals out were wide open. Inside the Grand Lecture Hall, the atmosphere had changed. The silence of fear was gone, replaced by the buzz of collaboration. The beast, the massive blackboard, was still there, but it wasn't covered in one man's ego anymore. It was covered in hundreds of different handwritings. Leo stood on the podium. He was 11 now. He stood a little taller, his shoulders a little broader. He didn't need a box to reach the microphone anymore. Dr. Evelyn Gray stood to his right, smiling. General Holloway stood to his left, looking proud. And in the front row, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief, sat his grandmother. "Welcome," Leo said. His voice was steady. "Welcome to the first day of the Mathis Scholarship Program." He looked out at the audience. It wasn't just filled with the children of senators and CEOs anymore. It was a sea of diversity. There were kids in hoodies, kids in hijabs, kids with taped glasses and worn-out shoes. Kids who had been told they weren't smart enough, rich enough, or good enough. "My father," Leo continued, "believed that genius doesn't have a zip code. He believed that the next Einstein could be mopping a floor or serving coffee or sleeping in shelter. Leo walked down the stairs. He approached a young girl in the first row. She looked terrified. She was clutching a plastic bag full of books, looking like she expected someone to throw her out. Leo stopped in front of her. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Maya," she whispered. I'm from Detroit." Maya, Leo Smilat. He reached into his backpack, a new one, sturdy and strong, and pulled out a leather notebook. It was brand new. The pages were crisp and white, waiting to be filled. "Here," Leo handed it to her. "For your ideas. Don't let anyone tell you they're scribbles." Maya took the book. Her eyes lit up like stars. It was the same look Leo had seen in the mirror when he finally solved the paradox. "Thank you," she breathed. Leo turned back to the room. "This building used to be a place where they guarded knowledge," he announced. "Now, it's a place where we share it. We don't care about your parents' bank account. We care about your mind. We care about your truth." He walked back to the blackboard. He picked up a piece of chalk. Professor Sterling spent 20 years trying to balance an equation that couldn't be balanced, Leo said, because he forgot the most important variable. Leo wrote a single word on the board in large, bold letters. Humility. "Science without humility is just arrogance," Leo said. "And power without heart is just bullying." He dropped the chalk. It didn't break. "Let's get to work." The room erupted, not in polite applause, but in cheers. Kids were high-fiving. The general was shaking hands with students. Dr. Gray was laughing. It was a symphony of joy. Leo walked over to the window. He looked out at the city. He touched the glass, and for a moment, he saw his reflection. But he didn't just see himself. He saw his father, Marcus, standing behind him in the reflection. Marcus was wearing his blue janitor's uniform, leaning on his mop. He was smiling. He gave Leo a thumbs up, and then, slowly, he faded into the light. Leo took a deep breath. The weight was gone. The grief was still there, a quiet ache, but it didn't hold him down anymore. It fueled him. He turned to the camera, breaking the fourth wall. His gaze was intense, piercing right through the screen. They underestimated him because he was small. They mocked him because he was poor. They tried to break him because he was different. But they forgot one thing Leo said to the audience. "You can't break the truth, and you can never, ever keep a good mind down." Have you ever been judged by how you look? Have you ever felt invisible? Share your story in the comments. And remember, the next genius might be sitting right next to you. Don't miss them.